Hey guys, welcome back to Player Level 4, a podcast dedicating to bringing your game to the next level. As usual, we have lots of thoughts on the meta, and a couple special guests with us this week.
You know, we kept bringing Ragerin back on good behavior, but, sometimes he's not as good as he should be, so we figured, give him a week break, maybe he'll do a little bit better.
His badonka-donka-donking didn't help his case.
Yep, there goes Kit with his badonka-donks again. Much like Noetherian recently snuck into a first-place finish in a recent unheroic tournament with his armor and big butt heavy deck. Speaking of which, I would like to welcome him back to the cast. Noetherian, what have you been up to lately?
So, mostly I've been working on organized play from an organizational level. I'm really excited to be helping out Justice and the Reddit community with a big tournament next Tuesday. I hope you'll all head over to the SolForge subreddit to check out the tournament going on Tuesday night after the Stoneblade cast. Should be a lot of fun. Also, by the time this podcast goes up, we should have an official announcement on Forgewatch.com for the Forgewatch Constructed Deck Invitational Tournament. So check out Forgewatch.com, click on the tournament links, and by the time you're listening to this, the announcement should be up.
Guys, that's great and all, but you're keeping the Minister waiting.
Kit, what are you talking about?
He goes by many names, Fox. He's the Dragon Master, the Minister of Propaganda, the Holder of Shiro. Some of you might know him by his human name, though, Brian Kibler. But to me, he'll always be the guy with the zebra scarf.
Really, Kit? Really? I mean, I really wish we could have gotten Shiro on the show, but we can settle with Brian. I mean, no offense, Brian. No offense. But since you're here, why don't you tell us about your role in SolForge as of lately? And feel free not to censor any spoilers. We love spoilers.
Well, Shiro was just barking at the door not that long ago, so if you want him instead, I can. But yeah, I for those who are unaware, I am one of the designers and developers of SolForge. I also handle our sort of marketing and PR stuff, which is where the Minister of Propaganda title comes from. That's actually what my business cards say, by the way. That's not just something that's goofy name that I spout out whenever. It's literally what they say. But yeah, we've been working on all sorts of cool stuff, and I've been actually doing a lot of this lately. A lot of talking to various people in the community, doing interviews, podcasts, streams, and stuff. As those of you who do watch the weekly stream know, I'm the host of that, the official SolForge stream every week, and it's really cool to have opportunity to interact with our community on a regular basis.
Yeah, I'm really, really happy with what you do. It's nice to see a company just take the time out of its week to talk to the community on a regular basis and just answer questions live. I know, sometimes even on like Blizzard forums, for instance, it's a struggle just to get a reply from a dev. But every week we have the chance to talk to you, so it's really wonderful. I appreciate it a lot. But we had a couple questions we wanted to do, so I'd like to call this Q&A with BMK, just because it sounds nice.
Oh my gosh.
But my first question for you is with Set 1 out, we finally got the chance to play with it. What are you most happy about in Set 1, and what aspects really came together better than maybe you thought they would?
Well, I think that what we're happiest with the first set is really that it's something that's providing people with a lot of various options for building decks. The size of the set compared to a lot of initial sets for many TCGs is a bit smaller. A lot of TCG initial sets end up being something more like 300 cards or so. And our initial set is only a little under 200 cards, which can potentially have the problem that there are only enough good cards to build one or two real decks. And we've seen a lot of variety in the decks that people have been playing in the various tournaments organized by the community. And we've seen despite many people's protestations about legendaries and stuff, we've seen lots of decks that have been successful with even no legendary cards at all. So I think we're really happy with generally the sort of the balance that's been struck in terms of the ability for people to build a lot of different cool decks.
I'm, as one of the hosts of the tournaments that we do every week, I've been really happy just seeing the top 8s of our tournaments have half of the decks not featuring a single legendary, or even 1 or 2, and they're demolishing decks that have 12 legendaries in them. But I don't really think it's about legendary count. I just want to echo what you said and say, there's even an infinite combo that you can do in set 1 between drawing your whole deck and using Soul Harvest to just generate the ability to play infinite cards. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely wanted to provide a lot of cool sort of aspirational things for people to try and do. It's very easy for games to focus on the sort of core sort of competitive stuff that's going on, and a lot of people want to try and find just cooler things to do than just whatever the most efficient creatures and spells and whatever are, and the fact that you can deal infinite damage in a single turn by playing your entire deck over and over is something that, while that's unlikely to come up in most games that you're playing against a live opponent rather than against, the computer when you give all their creatures Defender, it is something that, allows people to try and, sort of imagine what the possibilities are.
I agree.
Well, we have another question here as well, and that's, what simple card mechanic aspect, whatever you want to call it, of SolForge do you think gives rise to the most strategic depth in the game?
I think it has to be there's really two answers. It's the combination of the leveling mechanic and the lane mechanic. The leveling mechanic allows the game to be a game that has a development of sort of a power curve without the necessity of a resource system. One of the challenges of a lot of games is balancing the desire to have what's going on in the game sort of become more powerful and sort of more epic and impressive over time. You want the game to build to a climax. You don't want just the most powerful thing in the entire game to just happen the first turn. Because it doesn't. You need to build excitement and build tension. And the leveling system allows us to do that without having to have the complexity of a resource system. Similarly, the lane mechanic is super simple. Creatures fight whatever's across from them. If there's nothing across from them, they hit the player. And with just that, there's tons of, not necessarily, strategic depth, but tactical decisions that go on, that while it's incredibly easy for, like, say, even a little kid, because of the combination of, no cost to play things, just put them on the board, they can just drag things, onto the field and just play against their friend, play against a computer. Neither of them really have to know very much to do that. We had, at our conventions, when we have our demo stations up, we just have little kids sitting there playing against their friends or playing against the computers for like an hour and loving it. And that's really something that's not possible for a lot of games that sort of have a more complex base rule system. And in SolForge, it's easy to play, but the actual strategies and such are what's complicated.
So what I got from this is Kibler is advertising to children. They're going to be the next cigarette company, guys.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I like to think that SolForge is much better for kids than Canada is, but
it's true.
I mean,
I do remember. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I do remember there was one kid at Gen Con who was in love with Grave Pact and kept trying to drag it onto the field, and nothing ever happened. But it kept going for like 10 minutes. But
yeah, I mean, I think that, I'm someone who grew up playing games my entire life, and I certainly think that the fact that I was able to, get into a lot of games when I was younger, definitely helped sort of my mental development. And, I was constantly engaged and constantly challenged with things as I was, growing up in school. Even when, my actual classes weren't challenging to me, I always had, games to find that intellectual stimulation.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry. I actually wanted to say that I love that there's so much less room to mess up your first couple games in SolForge. Being a little kid, not being able to figure out how to beat the boss in a level in Contra, playing Magic and, jamming 5 forests in my 70 card deck because none of my card costs more than 5 green. I mean, making mistakes like that prevented you from just completing the game. You can't really do that in SolForge, so I like that.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely wanted to make it such that you are able to play without really needing to know much of anything. And that's, I think, particularly for a digital game, that's there's a huge barrier to entry when you have to, learn a lot of complicated stuff before you can even start playing. The fact that, someone can just play like a very short tutorial and then know pretty much everything they need to know And there'll still be moments of discovery as they play, as they learn the importance of various things from a strategic or tactical standpoint. But the rules of the game, generally speaking, are extremely simple, and I think that's really important to remove that barrier to entry.
So one of the things that you guys started talking about at Gen Con was the upcoming draft mode, and you had given some examples around Gen Con time about what draft might look like, and I know that Stoneblade since then has been testing a bunch of different draft formats internally. Guess one of the cool things about being a digital game is that you can make up draft packs to look however you want them to look. But the question I had for you as a game designer is, how do you evaluate a draft format? If, somebody in the office comes up with a new way to produce draft packs and you guys go and you test it out, afterwards, how do you know if it was any good?
If it was fun, and how much fun it was. I mean, our goal really, is to make a game that is fun. And we, specifically for something like draft, it's very important that it continues to be fun after, the 4th, 5th, 10th time you do it, because the goal of a draft format, of a good draft format, is to provide, a varying experience. And compared to constructed play, the idea behind constructed play is, trying to identify, what you believe are the strongest cards and combinations of cards from the entire card pool. And, a lot of your experiences playing constructed is going to be playing the same deck frequently or playing against similar decks frequently. And that's fine, because the exploration of trying to figure out the interplay between the cards you're playing with and the cards that, other people are choosing to play with, that's the challenge there. Whereas in draft, you're really looking to provide a new type of experience, like a new variation of the experience every time someone drafts. So one of the big things that we've been working on, we've been experimenting with a bunch of different models for draft, is to sort of increase the sort of variation in what decks look like and how games play out. Some of our early draft versions ended up, a lot of the decks just looked too similar. You'd end up picking many of the same cards very frequently. And some of this was the specific draft version that we were using, and some of it was the nature of the card pool. Because if you don't have significant variations in power level based on the cards in your pool, a lot of this is really about synergies. It's about changing the values of cards depending on the other cards you have. Like a lot of this is stuff like the card, for instance, Jetpack. Jetpack's a card that if you have it in most decks doesn't really do much of anything. But if you build a deck where, you have a lot of powerful defenders, and you are able to use Jetpack much more powerfully than other people would be able to. But if your draft format constantly has you choosing between, say, Jetpack and Ionic Warcharger, you're almost always going to choose Ionic Warcharger just because it's consistently just a powerful card. So we were looking at ways to provide you sort of a range of different choices in terms that would allow you to make those more sort of interesting decisions more often in the draft.
I really like that. Specifically, just being able to draft a Nexus core, which, normally isn't a good card, by itself in a vacuum, but being able to toss a jetpack on it and just suddenly have this massive wall of a creature that's hitting you for 3 that you don't really want to stick a creature in front of. Not gonna do much trading well. But as an arbiter of the unheroic format, I was the one who established that on the community tournaments. This next one's really important to me, and that is, how are you going to specifically design lower rarity cards in the future, or even balance the ones you have towards the new draft format?
Well, that's we've definitely been sort of reevaluating some of the cards that are at the lower rarities right now, in large part due to draft. As many of the players in the community tournaments have seen, cards like the Shapers can be very dominant when they, in particular, when there aren't the heroic and legendary cards that can potentially overpower them. When you're playing with a sort of flatter power level cards, those stand out a lot just based on the way that the games play. We're certainly looking at the Shapers very carefully, in large part due to their influence on the draft formats. We were having a lot of games of draft that would involve Shapers that just wouldn't be very fun because they just cause the games to just be very similar all the time. This is actually sort of a larger point just from a game design perspective. I've had a number of people ask, like what we feel about the power level of various cards and, their roles in sort of the metagame that's been established by the community tournaments. And some people are like, well, a card like Everflame Phoenix, a lot of people point to that being one of the most powerful cards. And while it may be one of the most powerful cards, it's also one of the cards that I think is good if it's one of the most powerful cards because of the way that it presents in gameplay. The Phoenix creates exciting moments that, when you draw, and it also has a much broader sort of spectrum of impact that it has on games. When you draw a Phoenix in the first couple hands of level 2, it's frequently a pretty weak card. And, doesn't really have a big impact in the game. Your opponent can frequently get rid of it at very low cost, and, it isn't nearly as powerful. When you draw it later on, you draw it, third or even fourth hand in level 2, it's very powerful. So a card that has that sort of highs and lows of gameplay and has sort of more interesting gameplay to it and more variance to how it plays out are the sort of cards that they're fun when they're good. If a card like, say, Flameshaper Savant is your best card, and I'm not saying that it is, if a card like that is your best card, I think that's more of an issue because the gameplay that it creates is much more sort of repetitive. That the same thing happens all the time once that sort of card is in play. So you don't really have that sort of game variance. It's much more a variance killer in terms of how it actually plays out.
Well, that's great to hear. There's a lot of fun stuff that we've been doing with just, unheroic and standard. And, even these little miniature draft simulators that we've been playing around with has just been a blast. But as for future sets, where do you see room for improvement? How can you make, set 2 even better than set 1? And that's a pretty high bar.
Well, I mean, we have tons of things that we, in some cases, just couldn't do in set 1 that we know are going to be a lot of fun. A lot of people have asked about the status of structures. We had structures in our initial demo version of SolForge during our Kickstarter campaign. Structures being cards that stay in a lane. They can be in a lane in addition to a creature and have an effect in that lane. And we ended up removing structures from the first set, in part due to technical issues and in part due to interface concerns. We just basically hadn't gotten them to the point that we were happy with them, and decided that we were better off holding off for later on that card type period, rather than trying to spend the time to make it work, as opposed to just making other cards. So we have tons and tons of various designs and entire mechanics like that we have waiting to make additional sets. And things like structures can provide a lot of different texture to the way the games play out. The nature of SolForge with the way that creatures constantly fight. And that it's all sort of funneled through combat can mean that there's a certain lack of permanence to things because creatures inherently will just die. But structures give you a sense of permanence that allows you to sort of take things in different directions that we haven't really been able to see with just the first set.
Okay. So I think that the next question I had been mostly answered already. We've been roaming around through a lot of great topics. Kit, you want to throw off the next one?
Sure. Well, as a digital game, you're afforded this great opportunity for balance changes. Have you guys figured out what your philosophy is? I mean, I know you can change things at will. I know you want to change them for fun, but are you going to just make sweeping changes like we saw earlier? Are you looking to change things through rarity, through card numbers, functionality? Like, have you figured out a philosophy towards that?
I mean, our general philosophy is that we any change that we make are going to be to what we believe is the maximization of fun for the audience. That, for instance, if there are cards like the example I gave before, if for instance we felt like Everflame Phoenix was the best card in the set, then that card being the best card in the set isn't unfun for people. We're not trying to sort of squish the power level down together so everything is the same power level. It's important for games to have cards of disparate power levels because that's where sort of the texture of the gameplay comes in. If some, in particular, if they're sort of better and worse at different times, much like the Everflame Phoenix is. So our general philosophy is that we don't want to just make changes lightly. We don't want people to constantly be wondering if their cards are going to be the same next week, because we want people to feel like they can both make intelligent decisions with, what cards they're trying to acquire. This is particularly an issue once we have the ability to actually acquire specific cards. Right now, if for instance we changed a particular legendary, that no one would really be like, oh man, I went out of my way to get those legendary cards on the auction house, or I specifically bought those as singles somehow. So it isn't the same impact as it is once people have legitimately invested time and resources and whatnot into acquiring cards. So that's something that we're very cognizant of. We don't want players to feel like they can't be confident in getting things that are good cards. If there's a card that people generally view to be the best, we don't want people to be scared off from trying to get that card because they're afraid it might get changed. That said, we do feel like if things are causing the format to not be fun, some sort of mistake that we made, that we definitely want to make changes to things to make sure that things are fun. But it's important to recognize that we have a lot more options than just changing or banning or whatever specific cards. Those of you in the audience who played Magic probably remember the Fairies deck that was very dominant for a long time a number of years ago. And very late in the existence of that deck, there were a number of cards that were printed that were very good against it. Most notably, Great Sable Stag was a card that was super good against that deck. And one of the problems was that because of the nature of a physical TCG design, development, and printing cycle, it was only able to be released pretty much after the damage had been done. That deck had been dominant and had really sort of frustrated a lot of people for a long time before that card could really come into circulation. And we have the option, as a digital game, to much more quickly release things that can potentially be solutions to perceived problems in the metagame. So if there's a particular deck or particular card that's causing frustrations, people don't feel like they can beat it because there aren't the appropriate tools, we can create those tools and release them very quickly. So we have a lot more flexibility than physical games to do, both in terms of actually being able to change offending cards rather than ban them, but also just in terms of other options that we have on the table as well.
So that makes a lot of sense. I'm actually an old Bridge player, which might date me a little bit, but it's easy to say like you don't want to play with powerful cards, but I can tell you games like Bridge and poker, aren't any more fun if you take the aces out of the deck.
Right. Well, that's the sort of response you have to a lot of people. They're like, this ace is too good. You should make it a jack. This deuce is too bad. You should make it a jack. It's like then you just have a deck that's all jacks, and that's not fun.
Yeah, I remember the original balance change you guys made was, I believe you said you wanted to get rid of that flat power level feeling. It wasn't very fun when the majority of your cards were 5/5s, some of them having some special abilities, but the majority of them being 5/5s, 10/10s, 15s. You guys made a couple drastic changes, and I think it really, it fluctuated the way the game worked a lot in a very much positive way. The games didn't feel like they felt a lot less reliant on what you drew and more reliant on how you played the cards you had because they were all so different.
I mean, we definitely don't want, we don't want there to just be, the just basic things that you're just doing all the time that just run into each other and negate each other out. Like, if every single card in the game was Sparkbot, the game would be incredibly boring. Seriously, I mean, that's not knocking against Sparkbot, he's quite the spark plug, but, if you always have dudes that trade with each other at every level, or you just have dudes who are good at various levels and bad at others, but there wasn't like a band of power level, you wouldn't have the exciting moment of, oh my god, he drew his Echo Wisp 3, and oh god, I drew my Scorchbane Dragon 3 right afterwards. Like, those are the sort of cards that can create exciting moments in the game, and when you're telling stories about things that happen in a game, that means we're doing something right, because even if you're complaining about it, it's creating an exciting moment for you and for your opponent.
I just want to take this moment right now to announce Forgewatch's official Skynet tournament, where you're only allowed to play Sparkbot. Just want everybody to get involved in this. Submissions will be open.
We need Sparkbot mode. But I think that would get old really, really fast, unless you change it to Zombie Infantry mode.
Ugh.
All right. Well, there are a lot of community members that have been asking for more ways to connect with the developers, and a lot of us remember when you and Justin came and played Sealed with us in the community chat. Is that something we can really look forward to in the future, that sort of interaction?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We definitely, like I said, here and earlier and a number of times before, the community is really what makes any game. Without you guys, without, the community, there's no reason for us to make a game because there's no one to play it. And we love, being supportive and interacting with our community. And, in addition to the weekly stream where, I actually wish I could play more on the stream against people, but there's just so many questions that I don't really have time to just get games in. But like for instance, when the big Reddit tournament was being held a week or so ago, I myself and Fantrick, Jeff Liu, we're hanging out in a number of the streams, watching and commenting in the chats and stuff. So we definitely make a point of trying to stay in touch with what's going on. And frankly, we are incredibly happy that with the amount of community supports that is sprung up around sort of creating its own organized play in the interim period until we actually have it as part of the game. And frankly, I'm sure that it'll continue to go on because the initial organized play tournament structure that we have is going to be pretty different from a lot of the tournaments that people are used to. And I'm sure people want to have their championship events with specific players involved and everything like that. So we definitely are very supportive of that. And as I've actually been in talks with Noetherian about various ways that we're trying to help support the Forgewatch Invitational event that's going to be going on. That the announcement should be up sometime soon, as he said, or even already, but it's not now because I'm from the past.
It's a
I love
blast
it
from
when
the
we
past.
don't even have to do our own shameless plugs. The devs do them for us.
Also, on that note, there is next Tuesday, the Tuesday after this podcast is put up on the web, there will be another Reddit tournament right after the stream. I plugged it earlier. I want to plug it again. And of course, if Brian or Jeff or Justin or anyone else at Stoneblade wanted to come out and hang out with us during that Reddit tournament, I know a number of players are going to be streaming it. It's going to be just as fun as the last one. So plug there as well.
I'm assuming you mean the 24th of September, correct? That is the Tuesday.
Yes, that is
Upcoming.
correct. Tuesday, the 24th of September is Reddit tournament number 2, right after the weekly SolForge stream.
Awesome. Well, you know what would make this all just so much better, Brian? If you could end this sweet little Q&A section with just, a spoiler of some of the new 20 cards, even a hint would be awesome. It'd be like a tiny little Christmas present for the SolForge fans everywhere.
Well, I can't give you any specific spoilers. We're actually still very much in the design and development process of those cards at this point. I can tell you that a lot of these cards are intended to make the sort of draft experience more dynamic in the ways that I was talking about before. At least among the sort of lower commonalities in those cards, things that sort of vary up what's good in various situations. Change your card evaluations as you go. There is one card that I think has the playtest name right now, Copycat. But I can't really give you any more information than that.
Aw, that's too bad. Well, I just wanted to let you know, for our viewers to know, because Brian does not want to influence your thoughts on the meta. We're going to move the meta chat until after Brian leaves. We're just going to actually jump straight into the draft section, so Brian can take part in that. I mean, he should be able to, just pick, between 4 cards randomly if that's what it takes. But, Noetherian, why don't you introduce the draft for us?
Okay, so as we talked about earlier, Stoneblade is still in the process of testing a lot of different ideas for what draft packs will look like, but we've pulled up a pack, and I'm sure Fox has this on the screen for you now. A pack of 4 heroics, which is what Stoneblade was talking about in Gen Con as an initial possibility of what draft might look like. So the 4 heroics in pack number 1. Orion Battle Droid, Unrelenting Dead, Runegrove Guardian, and with a fortunate upgrade to a legendary, Call of the Lightning. So, Kit, you're given these 4 cards at pack 1 of a draft. How do you start your draft?
All right, for me, most of the heroics at Unalloyan aren't really exciting in a limited format. They're much more synergistic. You want to use me in a constructed deck, so when I see a good Alloyan draft heroic, I jump on it every time. The commons at Alloyan are almost always good. There's very, very, very few bad picks at common for Alloyan, so I snap up the Orion Battle Droid. And then, I really don't know that outside of beta, which I don't know if I'll get, that there's many chances for bombs at the lower levels of Alliance, so I'm going to take the Runegrove Guardian just as a chance to actually go off with something. Kibler, would you like to take a crack at which two heroics you'd take?
I like your thoughts there. I actually think Orion Battle Droid goes very, very well with any of the pump effects in Utera. If you're able to enrage a battle droid, it's very frequently real difficult for your opponent to deal with. So I like the synergy between the battle droid and the pump spells you can get out of Utera. Plus, Runegrove Guardian is pretty sweet sometimes. So this would probably be what I would take as well.
What do you think, Fox?
I'm actually going to depart a little bit. I will take the Orion Battle Droid because, I love robots, and it's got a lot of armor. But I also really, really, really like Unrelenting Dead, and both of those are cards that play well with Pump. But I do know that there is one potential Pump spell in Alloyan that I would love to get my hands on with either of these. So I'm going to take the Battle Droid and Unrelenting Dead.
Okay, and I guess that brings it back to me. So I also take the Battle Droid. I think that Battle Droid is really hard for a lot of decks to deal with if those decks are missing the heroic level removal like Epidemic. On the other hand, I'm going to grab Call the Lightning. So, first of all, I really think that Alloyan and Tempest have a lot to offer each other. In particular, I think that both of them have quite a few durable creatures. Creatures with relatively high health. And I think that Call the Lightning is excellent with high health creatures. A lot of times you're going to see something like, a Rhinehorn Charger or you're going to see something like a Rhinehorn Charger or an Ionic War Charger, some high health creature survive at low health, a general who ends up unblocked because he only does a little bit of damage, and tossing out the Call the Lightning is a great kill card in a deck that has a lot of high health creatures that are able to stick around.
That's a really interesting point. Well, let's see what we got for the rares to go with this.
You want to start, Kit?
Sure. So I know what the next list is. I was hoping Matt would introduce them, but I got it covered. So I picked the Alloyan and the Runegrove, the Alloyan and the Utera cards. So my pack for Alloyan are Scythian Augmentation, Stasis Warden, Munitions Drone, and for Utera I got Spring Dryad, Oxodon Spitter, and Cadaverous Thicket. My thoughts are, at least in the Alloyan route, I don't know that I'm going to get a huge amount of synergy with Spring Dryad, but it's another way to have that bomb. So I'm going to take it anyways and just hope I can pick a bunch of Utera cards that can support it and clog up the lanes while my Droid and my Runegrove Guardian do work. And the other ones I think is a very interesting choice. I know that you don't get a whole lot of removal in these factions at the lower rarities other than, say, Toxic Spores and Bulwark Bash. And while Bulwark Bash will work with the Battle Droid and Toxic Spores is fine, I mean, I don't think I'll ever have a hard time picking up Toxic Spores if I absolutely need it. I'm still going to take the Stasis Warden just as pseudo-removal. I want to let my Spring Dryad and my Runegrove Guardian have time to grow, and there's no better way to do that than to just give the creatures Defender. What do you think, Kibler? You picked the same things I did. So you got Scythian Augmentation, Stasis Warden, and Munitions Drone, and Spring Dryad, Oxodon Spitter, and Cadaverous Thicket.
I agree with you that Spring Dryad is a card that can really get out of control, especially when a lot of decks don't have that much great removal in order to actually kill it. For the same reason, I actually like Munitions Drone here. I think that Munitions Drone is a card that can make any of your lower power creatures into significant threats. And if you are able to use Munitions Drone to pump a Battle Droid, it can be very, very difficult for your opponent to stop. So I think that those would be what I would go with here.
What do you think, Fox? You picked Unrelenting Dead, if I remember correctly, which gives you access to Contagion Surge, Blightwalker, and Explosive Demise, in addition to the augmentation, the Warden, and the Drone.
Alright, so I mentioned earlier that I would love to get any form of pump for either Unrelenting Dead or Battle Droid. They're very difficult cards to deal with if they get pumped up, so I'm going to snap up the Scythian augmentation, especially since it can become free at levels 2 and 3, and it just seems very powerful to have a free pump spell to slam on that Unrelenting Dead you just put into the center lane and basically told your opponent, deal with it. You've got a 12 health regen 8 sitting there. Along with that, though, I think I actually want to grab the Blightwalker because, I'm going to be... My first two picks sort of push me into a very difficult to deal with, build one threat and you have to deal with it. So I want to have the Blightwalker for the access to removal to control the lanes around it, and then just let them try and throw things at the center lane, and eventually it won't work.
Alright, Matt, how about for you? For Call the Lightning, you got access to Icebound Fortitude, which I know is a favorite of yours, Aerial Surge, and also Uranti Bolt. Don't forget about Siphon Augmentation, the Warden, and the Drone as well.
Okay. So I'm going to start out by grabbing the Munitions Drone for the same reason I grabbed the Call the Lightning. I think that in a Tempest Aloyan deck, I'm going to be looking to draft as many high-health common cards as I can, and Munitions Drone is a great way to get additional value out of those high-health cards. Also, as you predicted, I'm a big fan of Icebound Fortitude. It's a great utility card that I don't need to level. Happy to play Icebound Fortitude 1 to affect combat in multiple lanes sometime mid to late game. Works especially well with that Battle Droid that I grabbed. So Icebound Fortitude and Munitions Drone.
Interesting. I was surprised you took the Fortitude over the Bull, but I definitely can see it with the strategy that you're heading. Mm-hmm. Any spoilers on what the new draft format might be, Kibler? Is that something you can offer us?
I can tell you that we're exploring a bunch of different options. And as I said before, one of the things that we're talking about is trying to find ways that your experience changes throughout the draft, and that sort of the value of cards, the relative value of cards, can change over the course of the draft. One thing that we've been talking about possibly doing with this is, rather than having sort of set sizes of cards that you, rather set sizes of packs that you see, the size of the packs that you're seeing over the course of the draft change. So the quality, the average quality of the cards you're going to be seeing from those packs is going to also change. So you might have larger packs that'll give you a better chance of getting more powerful cards from them, as well as smaller packs where you're going to be frequently having to make decisions between cards that you wouldn't necessarily be picking out of the bigger packs. So that's one of the directions that we're looking at. But as I said earlier, we're exploring a lot of different options, and basically just trying to figure out what makes the draft the most fun.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for answering all those questions. It was absolutely great to have you with us, Brian. And let Shiro know that we'd love to have him too, if he can find time in his busy, barking-filled schedule.
He's probably trying to get some food somewhere right now, because that's what he does all the time. But maybe I can put some turkey on my desk next to the microphone, and he'll come by.
That'd be great for next time. All right, thank you, Kibler. It's been a blast. Everybody else, have a great week. I just wanted to give Kibler a chance to say goodbye to you all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. As I said, earlier in this cast and a number of other times, it is really the community that makes a game what it is. Without a strong community and people who are doing awesome things like this podcast, there really isn't anything for us to do with the game. So thank you all very much for what you're doing for the SolForge community, and with all the podcasts and tournaments and everything. So it's been a blast.